Hello everyone, it's Brian with you again with part 5 of Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. We're getting towards the end of it, so there shouldn't be too much left for those who are irritated by OMD. The last video was the period in which I liked the least, shall we say, although there were some songs that are okay. It's funny reading the comments because some people have said, they really like that period. Richard McCook said he liked a couple records from that period. I trust his judgment, and some people agree, some people disagree, so that's totally fine. And I guess that's to be expected. So at the end of that period, as I mentioned in 1996, Andy McCluskey sort of folded. He's folded OMD and went on to form a band called Atomic Kitten, a band I know absolutely nothing about. I didn't even know of that until many years later. But they released 4 records from 2000 to 2003, and he was joined in that project by Stuart Kershaw, who worked with him in OMD in the 90s period. And that band was together for quite a while, though. They did some reunion shows. I just know that because I read the Wikipedia entry. Well, I scanned the Wikipedia entry, so I don't know much about them. And at the same time, at the end of those records, Paul Humphreys formed a band called 1-2. It's ONETWO, all run together, with Claudia Bruchen. I don't know how to pronounce her name properly, from Propaganda. And they recorded one record in 2007 called Instead, which I tried to listen to some of it. I didn't love it. I was kind of momentarily interested in a track they recorded. It's a cover version of Pink Floyd's Have a Cigar, but it's kind of like techno nonsense, and I really didn't like it. Another thing that happened in 2008 was that the OMD, and that would be the McCluskey, Stuart Kershaw version of OMD, recorded a cover version of an Atomic Kitten song called Whole Again for an album called Liverpool, the Number Ones. And I hadn't heard about that till many years later, and I listened to it and I didn't think it was that great, but that's sort of the landscape until 2006, when a German TV show, I don't know the name of the show, sent a request to ask if OMD would consider reforming. And they did a tour. And out of that tour came a record. So I'm going to just look at this in case I don't make mistake. Hammersmith Odeon, May 19th, 2007. They recorded a concert and released it first on CD and then on vinyl, which is called OMD Live, Architecture and Morality and More. So this is, as I say, from 2007, originally released on CD. This is a limited edition. This is 3,246 of 4,000. So I'll show you the track listing here, but essentially the first record is Architecture and Morality, but it's in a different running order. So it starts with the title track, Architecture and Morality, and then goes through. And I'm guessing they did that to leave the bigger hits until the end. So when they get to side B, you hear Joan of Arc and the other Joan of Arc, Maid of Orleans, the beginning and the end, and Souvenir before that. So I'm assuming they did that. Otherwise, they come earlier in the record. Side C is some of the big hits from the period I'm not crazy about. If You Leave, Forever Live and Die, Pandora's Box, and then Locomotion, which is okay. And then the side D, we have Sailing on the Seven Seas from the 90s, and then Enola Gay, Electricity, and Romance of the Telescope, which is from Dazzle Ships. So it's actually kind of an interesting set. And I don't know whether people knew at the time that they were going to stay together or if it was a one-off. This also includes the concert on CD, which, I think this is a better idea than giving us a download. And the records themselves come in just black vinyl. There is a colored vinyl version of this that I don't have. So all in all, kind of interesting, kind of good to hear that they went back and did the old stuff, Architecture and Morality, and I guess we're all hoping for the best. So after that, so that came out in 2008. 3 years later or so, they released a 10-inch single. This also came out on CD. It's called History of Modern Part 1, and this actually is the original lineup reformed. This says History of Modern Part 1, and two versions of History of Modern Part 1, and then 2 other tracks. The CD version of this has a lot more tracks. I think there's 10 or 12 tracks on it. I don't have that, but yeah, I think it's a pretty good song. They released a video for this, and it's actually not bad. Playing the yellow labels. And again, I don't know whether it was known that they would come out with an album after this, or if this was a one-off. I don't really remember what was going on at the time. But about a year after this, the band did release a full-length record called History of Modern. And under the title OMD, this is a hype sticker here, so it says Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, but actually on the record itself it just says OMD, History of Modern. And this is on two records, and once again it comes with a plain sleeve of the compact disc. The later repressing, so this is the pressing from 2012. It was repressed in 2018. That pressing did not have the CD, and here we have just basic labels. But my impression of this record is that it's actually pretty good. It has a bit of that sort of poppy sound that they adopted later, but it does sort of harken back to the earlier days. One thing about it is that it was recorded in different locations, so they were remote when they recorded this, so they would share files over the web and then put it together. They used samples for the first time, as I understand. And I don't think it's quite up to the standards of the earlier records, but I think it's far better than the 3 that came before it, for sure. And it seems like they were trying to get back into the classic OMD sound. It looks like there's a direction. So it starts with New Babies and New Toys. That's actually a pretty good song. You know, If You Want, it is a really kind of pop song, you know, but not yeah, it's okay. History of Modern Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1 is better. There's a couple tracks I don't like. Pulse and Green I don't really like. Sometimes it's pretty good. RFWK is pretty good. New Holy Ground is very Kraftwerky. Sounds, you know, but in the mellow way. The rest, you know, there's Sister Marie Says, which is a track they wrote in 1981 and finally recorded here. So, as I say, Pulse and Green I don't like. The Right Side is pretty good. And I would say overall, this is actually much, much better than what we'd heard in the Andy McCluskey years. So I'd give this a good rating, and, you know, it's sort of leading to where they, you know, leading to new things. The second record that came out after this, the one that came out after this, both Andy and Paul say is better, and I would agree with that. So the single from the record that came out next is a track called Metroland. This is a 12-inch single from Metroland, and the flip side is The Great White Silence. And this is, I think, really good. It's a upbeat songs. It's very synthy. Maybe Kraftwerk has kind of really upbeat. Worth listening to. And this is, as I tell you, this is from March 25th, 2013. So a couple years after the last record this came out. Hard to find this 12-inch single now. Good luck if you want to find it. It's really difficult. But after that, they put out the full-length record about a month, well, just a couple weeks after that. And this is it. It's called English Electric. I left it in the shrink wrap, but you can see that it's a die-cut sleeve. And this is the inner sleeve, and just a very plain labels. But I would say this is the best thing they had done since Dazzle Ships. And in fact, it reminds me of Dazzle Ships in many ways. The first track, Please Remain Seated, could easily have fit on Dazzle Ships. It's 45 seconds. It's kind of weird, electronic. And there's, I'd say, at least 4 tracks that harken back to Dazzle Ships. There's Please Remain Seated, Decimal, Atomic Ranch, and Final Song. They all are these sound collage type things, and in some respects, when I was listening to this the first time, I thought, oh, it's like they're revisiting Dazzle Ships. But it's also mixed in with some really pop songs, really glossy synth electronic pop. So it's kind of a mix of those two, but I think it's really, really interesting. Stay With Me, Helen of Troy, Dresden, I would say, are the really pop songs. Night Cafe also, but that's actually I think that's a really good track. There's a track called "Kissing the Machine," which was originally co-written with Andy McCluskey and Carl Bartos, who used to be in Kraftwerk, and that was by an album called Esperanto by Electric Music. And so the versions are similar, but they reworked it for this, and I think it works much better. Interestingly, the voice of the machine in the song is by Claudia Brucken from Propaganda. So when I mentioned that band that Paul Humphreys had with her, they were romantically linked apparently until 2013. So sometime after this record came out, I think they were no longer together. So this is better than History of Modern. I think it's the best thing I said since the first three records, and I think it's actually quite good. And I would recommend this for the later OMD records. Now, in 2015, they put out another 10-inch single called Julia's Song dub version. Of course, Julia's Song appeared on the first record, and this is a reworking. The side B is 10-1. So not really an essential thing. It's an Art Record Store Day release from 2015. I don't have much to say about this, except if you're a fan and a completist, you probably want to pick it up. If you're not, you could probably skip it. But it's kind of interesting to have. All right, so that takes us to 2015. And then a couple of other things came out that year. First is this picture disc. Now, I realize I should take this out of the sleeve because I think these have been known to degrade the record in it. But this is Dazzle Ships at the Museum of Liverpool. Apparently, there are 750 copies of this record. But someone once posted that they made a few more to correct some early errors. So there might be some ones with errors. I don't know what those errors are. There's the flip side. So this is essentially all of Dazzle Ships recorded at the Museum of Liverpool. And interestingly, it contains parts 2, 3, and 7 of Dazzle Ships, which were on the original version of the original record of Dazzle Ships. But parts 1, 4, 5, and 6 were not on Dazzle Ships, but they are on this release. You can only get them electronically. Not to say they're groundbreaking or anything. They're just a little, probably not critical that you have them. But so that's a picture disc. And then weirdly, I think on the same day, it seems like this was released. This is Access All Areas. There are a number of Access All Areas for different groups. You might have seen them before. And this has some tracks from the early days. So I'm just going to review my note here because I made a note of what this is. It's from the ITV archives, recorded at the Nottingham Playhouse on July 28th, 1980. So very, very early OMD performance. And it aired on television. It was a one-off show, and it includes some things that would appear on their second record, but most of the stuff is from the first record. And Enola Gay here seems to be unfinished, as it said. Again, one of these horrible sleeves I should change. This is kind of interesting to hear. This concert hadn't been released before, except if you had seen that show. So this is really interesting to hear early OMD live. So pretty cool. And that takes us up to the end of 2015. So I think I'll stop there and do part 6, if you can believe it. But I would say for this section, I think the band is getting back on the right track. Those two records, the two studio records, History of Modern and English Electric, I think are really good and the best things they had done since Junk Culture, Dazzle Ships, that kind of era. So once again, thanks for watching.